Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another Sunday report with Country Cuz here, and a lap steel lesson and some music. And today's a special day for me. Hello me. So today's actually November the 13th, which was my birthday. I was born in 1954, so today I'll be turning 68, I believe. Whew, you know. Been a long ride, but it's been a good one. I can promise you that. Don't regret a bit of it, and I had a good life and a good time, and still kicking and still making music. You know, a lot of people, they look at me and they say, that's an old fella there, and he's still trying to play rock and roll music. What's wrong with them folks? Well, guess what? I was raised up on rock and roll, people. I mean, from the 1970 era, it just kind of took off because I turned 16 then. There you go, a little bit of rock and roll Doobie Brothers style, or some 60s and 50s swing music. Playing it all, love it all, and I still love my country music too. We do that probably more than anything now, but I played in several rock and roll bands, and not heavy metal, but just some good old 60s rock and roll stuff and all. But I never will forget, and I'm just going to tell y'all a little story about this. When I was growing up, I turned 16 in 1970. In 1970, it seemed to be a big year, an explosion of southern rock music with Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers and Charlie Daniels Band and several others. But the cool thing is, I got to meet all these folks and actually intermingle with them. I'm going to tell you about it. Start with, I'm from South Georgia here in Cordele, and all my aunt and uncles, every one of them lives up in Macon, because most of them work for the Warner Robins Air Force Base, or used to be a company called Georgia Craft that was a paper mill. So anyway, we would go up there and stay a whole weekend sometime with my aunt and uncles, and of course my grandma lived down here, and we'd take her up there with us to my aunt's house, and that was my mama's sister, which was also my daddy's brother. So my two cousins that I got, Hey Dave and Larry, they was double first cousins of mine, and still are. And you know, and my aunt just passed away this year. My uncle's still living, my dad's passed away, my mother's still living, and she's 98 years old, and I'm 68 now. But anyway, just for the speeding up things, I never will forget the first really great music festival and rock festival, and everybody, my aunt and uncles called it a hippie festival. We called them hippies back then, because whenever we go up there to visit, the Allman Brothers had rented a house down there on College Street, and that was when my aunt and uncle lived, I think, 3 blocks away. Well, on Saturday around lunch, us boys would go out, and then they had a big old oak tree out there in the front yard, shade, and Dwayne and Greg and some of the other people, I don't even know who all was there, they would come out on the porch and bring they didn't have them big amps back then. Of course, I'm sure they had them, but they bring the small amps, and they sit out there and practice and play music. And us kids would sit out in the front and watch, and I thought that was the greatest thing. That's what kind of got me into music, was watching all these bands and stuff. But anyway, I never will forget, finally, not Greg, but the oldest one, Dwayne, I remember he come out there and he went back in the house and they was singing and playing, and they'd stop and then they'd write down some words on paper and all, and we'd watch them and we'd all laugh and say, well, them hippies is making some more music. Well, we kind of enjoyed it because they was actually making historical music at the time, but we didn't know it. But I never forget that whenever Dwayne went in the house, he stayed in there a little bit, and he come out the door, and I guess it was their mother. She opened the door for him, and he had this big old silver tray, and on that tray was a big old picture of tea and a bunch of paper Dixie cups, them big ones, like maybe 12 ounce or something. But anyway, he brought that picture of tea out there and set it on the ground in front of us and said, you boys look like you enjoying our music, and we appreciate you listening, and we just want to offer you some of our tea. And we all got us a glass of tea, and it was a big old jug full of ice, and man, it was good. So we got to meet them that way. And then again, years later, the Middle Georgia Raceway, that was a paved track. They had Atlanta, Georgia's Raceway, I think, sponsored it, but they had put up a racetrack in Byron, Georgia, which by then, that was in the late 70s, I believe. By then, though, my aunt and uncle had bought them a house, a new house out in the middle of a field, and it wasn't but a mile or two from that racetrack. Well, I was 16 years old when I drove up there, because my mom and dad and all them, they stayed the whole weekend, and they wanted to ride down there around that Byron racetrack, and there was some land behind it, which now is, I think, a subdivision, but back then, it was a pecan orchard with a creek going through it, and we went and rode around, and all these people, I don't even know where they come from, looked like Woodstock. Is what it looked like. And some of y'all may know it or remember. Some of y'all might have been there. But anyway, we rode around there all day and everybody. They had cooking and they had music and different little groups. They had bluegrass bands and rock and roll band and country western bands all in these little groups. But then the next day, I think that was Friday, the next day was the grand finale show, and that was when a lot of your famous bands, I don't even know who was there, I'm going to look that up, Bo, but I know there was a lot of famous people that, it was called the Atlanta Pop Festival, I think, but somehow they didn't get the permit for the Atlanta area place they was going to rent, so immediately they moved it to Byron to the raceway. And then it overflowed and spilled out into a farmer's pecan orchard, which I understand they had to end up paying him big money because of the trash they left behind for the cleanup. But anyway, so the next Saturday, the next day, we spent the night up there in Macon. The next day after that, me and my cousins and all that, my dad let me use his car because they used my uncle's car. And well, anyway, we used his old car. It was a 55 Ford or 56 Ford, one or the other. Anyway, we drove down there and we went around back of the racetrack where they were setting up this big old stage, and we sat there all day, and then we went down to the hot dog stands and got us a hot dog. Hot dog was probably 50 cents or 75 cents back then, or anyway, a couple of dollars would buy you a whole meal. Hot dog, french fries, and a drink. So, anyway, we went back, and I was sitting on the stage. Where the stage was, they had these steps right there at the back, and I was sitting there, and the Allman Brothers, they come up, and they was setting up the equipment, and Greg come up first. He was the youngest one, and he got to me, and he said, here, boy, you take this amp up there at that stage and let me go back and get that other stuff. And I said, all right. So I took his amp up there and set it off on the side, and then up comes Dwayne, and he said, thank you for helping. He said, I know you. He said, you one of the boys that was out there in the front yard listening at us practice, wasn't you, whenever we lived over on College Street? I said, yeah. He said, I remember you, because he said, you come up there and you stared at our guitar so hard. He said, you must like guitars. I said, woo, I love them. I said, I got one at home, and I did. And I said, I play in a little band. He said, cool. Well, anyway, I got to meet them, and Charlie Daniels was there. I got to meet him in person, and then later on, in 1976, we had a guy from Georgia run for president, Jimmy Carter. I don't know if y'all remember him, but anyway, he had a big concert that was a free concert because he was trying to buy boats or get out the boat. But anyway, over here at the school I was going to, which was Southwestern Georgia Technical College, and they had a runway, they had an airport basically. Matter of fact, Charles Lindbergh actually trained there, is what I understand. But in 76, I'm getting dry mouth here, or dry throat, but in 76, he had Leonard Skinner band come out and play for that, and I got to meet them too. And of course, you know, and then, you know, me playing and growing up music, I played in a gospel quartet. I did that for several years, and we got real good, went all around and toured. Matter of fact, we got a bunch of records that we put out. Play the lap steel back then. I played the regular straight old guitar, and then in the rock and roll band that I was in later in life, they needed a keyboard player, and I could play the piano a little bit, so I learned how to play the piano, and I got that on video actually, but old VHS videos. I watched some of it the other day, but we did shows, and then later on there was I had bought a Harley Davidson motorcycle, and I think this was in the 80s. But anyway, I got with a group called A-Bait of Georgia. It wasn't a club, it was an organization. American Bikers Towards Education or something. I done forgot what it was. But anyway, they made me the entertainment director, and I helped do the entertainment. Of course, headquarters was in Atlanta, Georgia, and we'd go up there to, there were swap meets and stuff. But down here, there's a little town called Araby, Georgia, and we had rented this big park. And it's got these, and the reason we rented it's got these shelters on it where they used to have these flea market sales, but we invited all these vendors that sold leather, kind of like, and this was also a week before Daytona. The name of the show there was Run to the Sun, but anyway, there was a rock and roll band or two up there playing, and one of them said that their guitar player had gotten hurt right before the show, and messed up his hand and couldn't play, and they said, is anybody in the audience good enough to come play like some lead guitar licks with us? Well, I didn't even say nothing, but everybody started hollering, yeah, get a country cousin, get that man. And so I went up there and they handed me a blue Fender Strat, because I didn't even take my guitar. I was doing other things back then. I was lining up games for everybody, and the TV station was there. But anyway, I got up there and played with the band, and that was the opening band for the band that we had hired that I didn't even know who was, but they pulled up in a big old bus, one of these here buses like George Jones drives, and the Happy Goodman family, which is also my kinfolk there. But anyway, and they pulled right around back of the stage, and they unloaded these speakers that was way bigger than I was, and they set up, and I talked to the man. I said that was unloading all. I said, you in the band? And he said, no, I'm a roadie. He said, I set up the equipment. He said, the band's in the bus, and when they ready to play, they'll come out. And so anyway, I set up there, and we played about 5 more songs, and the band come up there, and the band leader, and I was the last one to walk off stage because I was announcing the name of the band, and which they had handed me a paper, and I did some MCing, and I didn't know him really. I've heard of him a little bit, but I didn't know who it was. But his name was Derek Trucks, and so I said, all right, ladies and gentlemen, our main band's here, the Derek Trucks Band. And I said, I want y'all to welcome them. They from Atlanta, Georgia. And anyway, as I was walking off stage, this big old tall guy, he walked up in front of me, and he put his arm right there in my chest. And he said, hold on. He said, I might need you to help. Come on back up there. And he grabbed me and shook my hand. Boy, he had some big old hands, and he was tall. And he said, I'm Derek Trucks, and he had this long ponytail. And of course, I'm not real tall, but he looked super tall to me. And then he said, please pick up that Strat and you play with us. He said, I heard your licks out there, and I liked what I heard. So I got to play the full set with that band that night. Now, that was fun. Anyway, I've carried on enough. If you don't want to hear all this jabber, just fast forward it here to the music. But what we're going to do today, I'm going to teach a little bit about some rock and roll styles that we play. And it's just an open E tuning, and you can start right here. It's in open E, so the tune's in E, so we'll be going. I'm hitting the top 2 strings right here. That's going to be the 4th and 5th string. And then slide over. And give it that. But what I did right there was I'm hitting the 4th string, then working it back. If you watch, this thing right there is coming down first. It's muting that string, and then I'm hammering on, but you can't see it because I do it fast. I can use the loop and double that when I'm doing this part here. The guitar man's playing something like. Simple to play, sounds good, very fun, very rock and rollish, 60s and 70s style. And that right there is how you create a good sound on some rock and roll. Just one of those many styles. That's kind of a more of a up kick dance style swing. But anyway, like I said, today I'm 68 and still rocking out. And you know, I got a friend of mine that's 82 and he plays right along with us. He's our bass player. And he's still getting it done too, and he played with a lot of groups. He actually played with a pretty famous group called the Classic Four back in his day and all. But anyway, I hope each and every one of y'all has a great, great day. The weather went from being 85 degrees yesterday. We woke up this morning, it is 40 degrees. So, whew, it's cold. And it ain't gonna get no higher than 70 something today, they say. But 70 degrees is great weather to get outside and do something. So let's all play music, have fun, and stay young no matter how old you get. Thank you.